Hey, good afternoon, and welcome to today's episode of a special episode, a crossover episode of Boss Talk and From the Command Post. I'm Battalion Chief Mark Davis, and as always, very happy to be live here from the Public Safety Training Academy at our command lab. Today, we are going to present one of our crossover episodes, so we have an opportunity to talk about company officer decision-making, action taken, as well as command officer decision-making, actions taken at a woods fire that occurred on Old 100 Road in the Up County area of Montgomery County. Happened back in March 20th on one of our windy days out there. Rapidly escalating brush fire that occurred, and folks will tell you all about that. Kind of remind you a little bit of the large fire we had in 2012 in Germantown. It was nowhere near the scale, but it was escalating very quickly as that fire did. Those of you that weren't here in 2012, that was about a 400-plus acre fire, and at one point, every engine company in Montgomery County was committed to that event. So if you think about that, huge demand of resources and so forth. Not saying that this one could have got to that level, but it certainly was a very escalating event, and the folks will talk about actions taken there. As always, if you're a certified chief officer wishing to receive COPDI credit, then make sure that you fill out the form on the PSTA webpage, and Chief Gibson will take care of that. If you're watching from a firehouse, then we ask that you please identify in the chat, the YouTube live chat, what station you're watching from and how many people are watching. So today is a crossover episode. We've done a few of those, and I'm just going to get started by turning it over to Battalion Chief Blinkhorn, Russell Blinkhorn. He's going to be one of the moderators for today, and he'll get us started. We did allocate 90 minutes for this episode, so just be ready for that in the 60 to 90-minute window. Chief Blinkhorn, let's get started.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us if you're with us live. As Chief Davis mentioned, this is a crossover episode, so you have two moderators here today. I will be representing the from the command post, and I got Lieutenant Grierson from Station 19A shift representing Boss Talk. So we're going to go around the table real quick and do some introductions. With us today is the officer from the first arriving engine company on this event, Captain Brett Livingston from Station 34 on the A shift. Got Captain Mike Green from Station 14, also the A shift. First arriving command officer was Chief Chris Stroop from Battalion 5, the A shift. And then we have, finally but not least, the A shift duty chief, Chief Dimitriadis, joining us as well. So as Chief Davis mentioned, right, this is one of many, many large brush fires that we've had within Montgomery County. They're not uncommon. They're going to keep happening. So this is a good opportunity to hear from a larger scale one that progressed pretty quickly, and hopefully walk away with some thoughts and best practices for the next one we run, right? So we're going to get right into it. This event occurred on an A shift, obviously. It was a Wednesday, March 20th, around 1600 hours is when this call was dispatched. So we're going to start with Captain Livingston. He was assigned engine 734 that day. So tell us where you were, what you were doing, and how the call went out.
So we were just clearing a fire in Company 22's area, literally backing out of the driveway, and they put out Company 14 on the brush fire, small brush fire. So we took the call because we had just cleared. Literally, we're on the street with our lights on. Took off up the road. We were closer, obviously closer from where we were. We were on Barnesville Road already. literally Barnesville Road, right on Old 100, and we're there. Just a run-of-the-mill call, so we believed.
So dispatch single engine to a
Single
small
engine.
brush fire, right?
Yes.
And you were at Station 22.
We were
Just leaving
just
Station
leaving
22.
Station 22's house fire.
Okay.
Station 22 had just, we were mopping up, packing hose, done. We left and got picked up on this call.
So being familiar with this area, right, this particular brush fire was in a Station 9 box area. I think Station 14 is normally going to be first due to that now with AVL. However, 22 is not far behind, right? This is one of those areas where those three companies usually coming together pretty quickly.
Correct.
Yep, so hence you being assigned first due from 22's area.
Correct.
Did you have full staffing?
We did not. We were in the middle of driver training, so my fourth was currently on the ladder truck on the scene of the fire still. So it was me, my driver, and my paramedic.
Okay. So any special notes you saw in the call on the way there?
So it started populating, county police on the scene. It wired down, just a small brush fire. It said 50 feet, I believe. It did have all the information right on the screen. Just set up for that. Montgomery came back to me a couple times telling me updates. I asked for the power company immediately. Arrived on the scene, had a small, it wasn't that out of hand yet, but it was, I definitely walked over and talked to the cop, and the cop said there's a power line down right there, and that's right where it started. So that was identified early. Nothing out of the ordinary on the call. It was extremely windy, extremely dry. We were talking about it later that day. It was a red flag warning all day, and we had our hands full at that point. Out of manpower, 750 gallons of water. And,
Okay, so you show up, small, what do you describe as a small fire? How big was this fire when you first got there?
maybe 200 feet back in the woods. I thought I could see the end of the fire, so my goal was literally to pull a line and stretch straight into the woods and try and outrun it and get in front of it.
So this started right on the edge of the road.
Right on the edge of the
right?
road,
Power line
probably
down.
15 feet in, and it was actually in the only driveway to the area, which was probably some sort of maintenance line driveway. There was no house around it. We
Okay.
were dispatched. They told us it was headed toward the houses. Well, we couldn't see a house anywhere.
Explain the topography of this area,
So-
where you're operating.
So really thick woods,
Can we pull up the map, by the way?
kind of overgrown in the area, and we're at 109, Old 100 Road, and there's a driveway, a real long driveway to the left. So as you go down, that's a bottom, a couple hundred feet down would be my guess, into a valley, and you go up the hill. As you go up the hill, where you see the 109 is right about where we made entry. There's a little teeny driveway right there, just south of the 109 number.
So
everybody
you're talking
would
at,
be aware.
looking at this overview, you're at the northern,
We're at the top side of this map, which is going to
Okay.
be a northeastern side of the of Old 100 Road, and where we parked was just below the 109.
okay, where that driveway, is that what the driveway is you're talking about?
The long driveway to the
Yeah.
left is where we thought it was originally, but it turned out to be all to the right. There was no fire on the other side of 109. Met the cop. The cop told me exactly where the wire was down. Sure enough, walked over, the wire was down and was burning all around it. So everything to the right of us had a hill, probably a 10 to 12 foot hill straight up, like get a run start hill.
So you're operating at the bottom of a hill,
Bottom of a hill
right? You got about
On
a
it.
200 by 200, you said?
would be my rough guess in the beginning.
Okay, area
Yeah.
that's already into the woods.
Already into the woods with
Okay, so
high
this-
winds.
For most part, we're talking about woods right now. Is there any farmland?
No
associated
farmland,
with this?
all woods.
All woods.
Lots of down trees in there, lots of stumps burning, treetops on fire. We talked about this earlier as a group, and it's a strange fire. You're going to hear from Captain Green. My course of action, my gear, was my turnout pants, boots, helmet, gloves, and a long sleeve T-shirt. And that is literally to go as fast as I can to get to the back of it. And obviously, we didn't make it in time, but we tried. We pulled a 300-foot, 2-inch line, and then started pulling racks. So,
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on something that you said earlier about the red flag warning. So we know we had some, in the dock log that morning, some weather briefing for that day. Was there anything specific that you thought to talk about or included in your lineup as far as any brush incidents?
So every morning we have a high wind issue. I always talk about that with my guys. Be careful about venting. Be careful of, we get in one of these houses and open something up wrong with this wind, we're in trouble.
Were you thinking brush fire stuff
I really
at all?
don't like to think brush fire
Okay.
ever.
Captain Green, same question for you.
Yeah, it's not something that we talked about that particular morning, but I think, as Brett has said, that most of the time we're looking at that in terms of structure fires because we just don't run that many large brush fires like this in the county. They happen, as we've talked about, in every couple of years as far as something of this magnitude, but I wasn't thinking about it from that perspective.
And as an older officer, we're a very young department. If you look around the table, you see young guys that they just don't remember this stuff yet. They will.
Yeah,
They'll get it.
I'm right
Get
here.
it in their head.
The other thing I wanted to touch on, Captain Green, you have a lot of different units that you guys kind of cross-staff and brush units and now boats. Was any of that brought up into discussion in the morning of if we run some sort of a brush or wildland event, who's doing what?
That's every morning.
Okay.
Right, so the lineup board is pretty robust. In addition to the engine company and the medic unit, we have the boat listed on there with a crew, the brush engine, the tanker, and the brush truck, and the UTV. So everything has an assignment or somebody assigned to it so we know what's going on.
Was there any sort of wrench thrown into the operation when you guys ended up going, trying to figure out what units you wanted to take?
No, because the reason is because the tanker and the brush truck were dispatched first. So as Brett touched on immediately, we were dispatched and immediately canceled when he took the call. As he started to call for additional resources, the first thing that went was the tanker and the brush truck. Those two people for that day were assigned to the medic unit. So they took those two pieces. That left me my 4-person engine crew back for the engine. So we didn't have any issues with that.
Okay. Captain, let's go back to, I guess, when you first get on scene. It sounded in the call in the notes. Was there anything that seemed kind of out of the ordinary besides just wires down with a brush fire, where you were immediately thinking, let me plan on calling for more units, and what units might those be?
So anytime I see a brush fire where it's active, I'm going to start a tanker. I'd rather have it on the way and turn it around.
Okay.
Safety-wise, we're in the middle of nowhere, literally. I mean, you have Mike and them coming, and I have 9 coming from the other side. But it's still, you're talking 8 to 10 minutes before they get there. It's not like you're in the city. We had our hands full. We were short-staffed. 750 gallons of water isn't going to last long.
Were you thinking of a water supply plan while en route?
No,
It
I don't
seems
believe
like a
that was
pretty-
my issue at that point.
Yeah, my new single engine call, not really thinking about, probably not going to expand that.
Correct.
Did that ever come into play early on?
So I got lucky. I had some people show up kind of undispatched.
Okay.
I had a duty chief show up and he pulled his own line, as a matter of fact. So we're chasing fire literally through the woods, just trying to get in front of it, cut it off from getting all the way back. And, I didn't know where I was parked, how far those woods went back. I had no idea. I didn't have the time to look it up. It wasn't worth looking it up to me. I wanted to find where it was first. And as soon as I came over the hill and saw the cop, I walked up to his car and thanked him for a wonderful afternoon.
Did you know about how far the fire had extended? Could you see kind of where the head of it was when you had gotten there?
When I first got there, I could see the end of it.
Okay, so you could see pretty much everything at that
Correct.
point on fire.
Correct. And with the wind blowing the way it was just,
Moving.
yeah, there were fireballs going through, huge embers blowing out of the top of trees.
Okay. All right. And then I kind of wanted to know, Chief, at what point were you listening, or were you?
So we had just cleared a fire in 22's area. We had a mulch fire outside that extended into some siding into a house. I could see just the wind was just blowing across that guy's mulch bed into that siding when we got there. So you knew you had, some gusty winds. We were just clearing that event, and I watched engine 734 turn out of the driveway the opposite way of Germantown like heading towards 14 with their lights on. And I was like, what's going on? Because I was still on 7 Alpha 4 at the time. And so I called him on talk around. I said, where are you going? And he said, we're going to a brush fire. And I was like, oh, here we go. So, but we were not very far behind. We were probably within 3 miles of the incident from the house fire that we were at. So I pulled up relatively soon into the incident. I mean, I don't know that I saw you when I got on the scene, but I saw that the engine was already parked in the middle of Route 109, blocking the lanes of traffic, and the duty chief vehicle was already there. So when I showed up, it was just those 2 units, and 34 was busy, but I didn't see any fire when I got there. Like, I was looking for a down line. I was looking for, okay, what's the safety issue here with this down line, and where's this fire, and where's it going? But Captain Livingston got on the radio and said, hey, it's running. It is running away from us now. We need more help. And he told me, you know, he had gone to 7 Alpha 3, and I had switched over, and I established command when I got there, and I listened to what they had, and I was just thinking, okay, we need more resources. But again, I'm thinking we can mitigate this. It's not horrible. Yeah, again, I can only see the road from where I'm at. I can't see the smoke, and I can't see any fire. But because, you know, the wind is at their back, and the fire's blowing, you know, in an opposite direction of where I am. So I'm thinking, okay, it's running, but, you know, they can extend a line and then put the fire out. So I think Company 29 had just cleared as well from that house fire, and they were quickly on the scene within, you know, 3 or 4 minutes after me. So yeah, those were and then the safety officer was already there too, because he was coming from the fire. So there was a bunch of people on the scene right away. But again, we couldn't see any fire that was moving. It was obviously moving in an opposite direction where we were.
So let's back up just a minute, right? Let's get back to, you're on scene, right? You had already called for the power company.
Correct.
You had recognized the fire's running away from you. You made that radio transmission. What exactly did you request at that point?
My first request was 1 engine, 1 brush truck, and then a tanker, and then 7 Alpha 3.
Okay.
And that was, I wanted to try and set something up because I didn't know if I had a chief coming or not yet at that point.
And did you establish command?
I did not.
Did not, okay.
I did not.
So you got yourself, what was the second engine?
Second engine would be 29's engine,
29's engine was the second.
Was the
right?
second
Who's
engine.
tanker?
14.
14's tanker and 14's brush truck?
Yes.
Okay. So they're all coming. Chief Stroop is listening to this, and you decide to self-dispatch yourself from the 22 house fire that they
Yep.
left onto that call.
Yep.
So when you got there, were those units that we just discussed already there or just pulling up?
34 was there, and the duty chief vehicle were there.
Duty chief being Chief Dimitriadis?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the safety officer and I showed up at the same time. And then when we called for an extra unit, engine 729 showed up within 4 minutes or so after that.
Okay. And you were parked behind their engine?
Initially, I was parked behind their engine. Again, it's a 2-lane road. There's the woods to our immediate right as we're, you know, facing Company 9. And then to my left, there was just a small clearing where I could move my vehicle into. So I moved my vehicle into the clearing so I could kind of look up the hill. But again, I didn't see much, you know.
The wind is at everybody's back, right?
Yeah,
And it's
correct.
pushing the fire into
Away
the
from
woods,
us.
away from you. So
Correct.
you can't really tell how far into the woods it's going.
Can we see the woods fire overview map? Because this will identify the wind direction and the overall outline of the fire. There we go. So about where that, I guess where Route 109 is labeled on that map, where it's the defined area, that's about where the command post and Company 34 were parked. So again, they were at the very bottom edge of this incident. and it was definitely moving away from us. So the wind was moving, 20 miles an hour, west northwest. So it was definitely moving at a pretty good clip there. So I pulled out of the way and was able to park my vehicle, and they were calling for more units. I think I called for a couple more units, a couple more manpower units. And then I had a conversation with Chief Dimitriadis, and we were talking about, okay, water supply, and we were talking about possibly another command officer to come and help out, because we were going to build this thing out. It was going to be pretty spectacular. We knew, because it was just moving so fast. So I called for Water Supply Task Force, and I called for a second command officer. So again, I was faced with the issue of there was help that was being called for. Company 34 was, hey, I need more line, I need more people, I need more resources. But I'm thinking in my head, I'm looking at Route 109 in front of me, and I see it's completely blocked. 34 is parked in the middle of the road, 29 is parked in the middle of the road. And now I'm thinking, okay, what is our water supply plan? Because we've called for tankers, we can supply, but how am I going to supply these tankers? So I was thinking I need to get Route 109 open as quickly as I can to move water through there. So that was a problem initially. So we initially had to shut down their attack line in order to move apparatus. But prior to that, we called for engine 7, another engine. So that's when enter company 14 into this. They are listening, and they hear that Route 109 is blocked and they can't get by. And I'm thinking to myself, when I'm calling for these units, where are these units coming from? Because I see that the road is blocked. I'm thinking that we're going to have to make a stand from Route 109. I'm not thinking that there's something on the other side. There's a way to get to it from the other side. And Captain Green came up on the radio, and he's like, look, I can see possibly going down Conoy Road. Is it Conoy or Conoy?
Conoy.
Conoy. Going down Conoy Road, we might be able to head this thing off. And he took it upon himself because, again, I was overrun with, hey, I need this, I need that kind of thing, to go down that road just to investigate to see if there is even a way that he could get to it. And that's when he came upon the house that he was at.
So backing up again a little bit, you show up on the scene, you establish command.
Yep,
You're having conversations with the duty chief.
yep.
You're calling for additional units because Captain Livingston is basically giving you intel that the fire is getting bigger,
Yep.
right? Is there any discussion about people running out of water at this point? Is that why?
No.
Was
but
there a water supply problem early in the event?
Just waiting for a tanker, the first tanker.
No, the first tanker we were just waiting on because Company 14
Okay.
was coming.
But you didn't, did you run out of water at any point?
Multiple times.
Multiple times,
But it's
okay.
it's going to happen in that
Sure,
situation.
yeah.
We know that. And you're just
Okay.
sitting there waiting.
All right, so do you recall how many additional engines or tankers or anything you called at that point?
So again, we had the initial call from Captain Livingston. He's looking for a brush truck and a tanker and an additional engine. So we got that right away. I called for another 2 manpower pieces, and then it was probably another 5 minutes before we called for the Water Supply Task Force.
That's where 14 came in. Do you have any questions? Yep.
Captain Green, were you listening to this?
Yeah, so like I
prior
said,
to-
we were initially dispatched on it, canceled immediately.
Okay.
So, saw the weather outside, we just left that area, we knew how windy it was. So I'm listening on the radio, I hop up in the front seat of the engine, and I'm looking for comments. And I can immediately see that this is probably going to turn into something. And when Brett got there, and just based on his transmissions and what he called for, I said, hey, you guys got to go to the bathroom, you better go now, because we're probably going to be going on this.
Yeah.
And it wasn't but a few minutes before that we were, after that we were sent.
Okay, and So going down the road, you're looking at the map, you're looking at the comments. What other tools did you use to kind of look at the terrain to see where you wanted to go?
So I was listening to the radio, and there was multiple transmissions on 7 Alpha 3 where the chief was saying the road's blocked. So I'm thinking, all right, are we even going to be able to get to this thing?
Right.
So I went to my cell phone.
Okay.
All right, that was the quickest way that I felt I could pull up Google Maps and get a satellite view, as we're looking at here, as opposed to just a map on a piece of paper or even the map on the MDC,
Right.
because I wanted a satellite view to see where the forest or the woods were. So I pulled that up and immediately saw the area, where they were going to be operating, because I knew where the address was, and I saw that, Conoy Road basically parallels Route 109, and the woods basically comes all the way down to Conoy Road. So that's when I went on the radio and asked the chief if he'd like us to head in that area. He said, stand by. And as time was just progressing, time was progressing, I knew that he was swamped and that they were kind of overrun. And that was one of Pat Colella's last shifts as my driver. And I said, Pat, let's just go to Conway Road right now. Worst case scenario, we don't find anything, we turn around, we come back. Well, we go down Conway Road, and when we got to the sharp curve that you see on the map right there, where the pond is, I immediately looked up. I saw that house, that 17415 Conoy Road, and the fire was 50 feet from the house.
Is that going to be the house that's all the way down that driveway?
No, yeah, at the very top of the screen.
Okay.
There is the house, and I could see the fire was right there at the edge of the woods, about 50 feet away. And I said, "Hey guys, I think we hit the jackpot here."
Yeah,
so we saw the pond. We laid a line up the driveway, and we're able to immediately go into action and cut off that fire immediately to the left of the house there. So I thought we made a decision. It ended up working out for us. Worst case scenario, we turned around, went back out, and went down Old 100 Road.
And did you have full staffing on the wagon?
Yeah, I had 4. So again, the whole entire wood line there on the left was on fire. So I had my 2 firefighters pull a line and begin to knock that down while I did a 360. And if you look further up on the map there, you can see there's a shed in the backyard and then a play set there. And fire was all the way into that area as well. So I ended up pulling a second line, knowing that we didn't have a water supply yet. We left that uncharged and just there in case we needed it. And of course, the rest is, further into the incident.
One thing that we were talking about earlier that I think we wanted to touch on was the conditions. So where you're at, where the house is, you're facing into the wind.
Yeah, wind was blowing.
It's coming towards
so
you.
You can't tell it from that photo, but from where Brett and those guys were, it is straight up the hill. We figured it up roughly 12 to 15% grade. So that's, upwards of 20-some degrees slope. You can see that kind of from the topographic map there as well. So we're at the top of the hill, and all the smoke was blowing right in our faces. And it wasn't but a few minutes into it that one of my firefighters said, "Hey, Cap, is it okay if I put my SCBA on? I can't breathe." Absolutely. And before you know it, all 3 of us had SCBA on because we tried Nomex hoods over our faces, and it just wasn't enough. And at one point in time, another 10 or 15 minutes into it, that shed back there caught fire, and there was so much smoke I couldn't even see it. They said, "The shed's on fire." I said, "What shed?" And next thing you know, I'm only 50 feet from it, and finally figured out where it was, and that we had a shed off. So that's how bad it was. You couldn't see anything.
Okay. All right. Could you see what was on fire in the woods as far as ground fire? Is it in the trees?
Mostly for us, it was ground fire because we were working the perimeter of this initially, just trying to keep it from getting to this gentleman's house. And then there was another house down over the hill a little bit further that Captain Weimer went to and checked on, which is kind of back there in the area where that kind of off the right-hand corner of the perimeter area, there is another house. It was working toward that house, so that's what we were also trying to see if we could cut off. But we ended up running out of water as well, and it took a while for us to get a water supply, get somebody to pump that line for us. So we were limited to 1 line for a while as well.
Were you thinking about did you have any homeowners that were trying to either help out or assist?
We did, and that was a little, so the homeowner of 17415, where we were positioning in his driveway. None of those folks were home, but the gentleman that lived next door had come over to check on things because he knew what was going on. And he called the guy and said, "Hey, you need to get home. Your home's being threatened right now." Well, that guy ended up being a construction. He owned a construction firm, and he brought in a skid loader and a front end loader, and said, "Hey, I'm here. I own the place. I can help." And at first, we kind of discussed it. Truck 34 was there, and the officer was Joe Kiefer. We discussed it and said, "Hey, we're not really comfortable sending you back there right now. There's so much smoke. You're not going to be able to breathe." We talked about SCBA, but he doesn't have training in it, so we probably shouldn't put him in SCBA. And eventually, as things, those guys started to get some more resources, started to knock down more of the fire, the smoke back down a little bit, we did have them engage and cut a fire line, and they did a lot of work that helped us out.
Was there any time you were thinking we might have to evacuate these houses in case any?
No, we had a pretty good position. Again, we were able to cut the fire off. It was about 50 feet from the house when we got there. We were able to cut that off pretty quickly, and I thought that we were able to maintain that. So from that particular house, no one was there. We didn't have to evacuate. They weren't home anyway, but.
Okay.
So I want to get back to, in a second, the traffic situation, right? And I also want to get to the duty chief. But before we do that, we have a question from the audience.
Yeah, so I guess a number of our members, right, they sometimes run some discussions, no discussion here, but a common discussion may have been on some social media recently, just from good firehouse discussion of some of our folks in MCFRS, was the use of technology and map books, and like, which do you use? So interested to hear from the company officers on this. One, did you use one or the other? And if you did, why? And if you did use some technology, what did you use? And how did it work for you? And was there something like, hey, I wish I had that here?
Well, in my case, I used my cell phone, but I also had the Sonom phone there if I needed it. I wanted the satellite view because I wanted to see what was woods. I knew that Conway Road paralleled 109. I knew that part, but I needed to see where the woods were. So that's why I wanted a satellite view, and that's why I ended up going to Google Maps because, in 2 clicks, I've got a satellite view of the area.
Captain Livingston?
So I am first due paper maps. I am everything else digital. However, on this incident, I grew up there. So I know that all those areas forever.
Yep.
A little cheating.
No, that's an advantage some of us have. Yep, I grew up in that area too, so I knew the swath of land. So before I get to you, Chief Dimitriadis, you had mentioned traffic, right?
Yeah, could I?
Sometimes that's something we struggle with on not only brush fires, but rural house fires, right, is maintaining one-way traffic for the tanker, so.
Yeah, so I thought, Company 34, their initial thought was, hey, I need to block the road so that people don't drive through the scene because we're going to be pulling the hose line off and, going through the woods to put this fire out, which it's fine. The only issue is now, fast forward, 40 minutes into the incident, and now we're like, okay, we really need to fill a tanker up. How's this going to happen when the road's blocked? So that was a big challenge. But once we were able to move, to one side and keep one lane open, man, that just it was a game changer.
The police had everything else shut.
Yeah. So I think they called for they called Chardon or DOT or somebody came in because there was somebody blocking like 109 and Barnesville Road. But I did want to say one thing about the technology. So when I'm trying to figure out where this is going, and we're talking about houses now, and there's a house that's potentially impacted. I'm like, where is this house, and how do we get to it? Is it off of Old 100 Road, or is it off of another road? So my cell phone is Verizon, and that area of 109, Verizon doesn't work. So I quickly found out if they try to call me or something, like it wasn't, messages were not getting through. So I quickly used the Sonom phone, and FirstNet worked just fine there. So that was
Same thing, Google Maps, Google,
Google, yeah.
Aerial view?
Google Maps, yeah. I was able to see the area just fine.
okay. Chief Dimitriadis, you were the duty chief that day. You were also just leaving the 22 house fire, is that correct?
I was actually in the same situation as Chief Stroop. We were just about to clear the scene. We had a minor collision on the scene, so we were talking about some of the investigative aspects of it. And I saw 34's engine running up the road, so I asked the question, where are they going? And I think Chief Stroop made the comment, they're going to what was dispatched as a small brush fire. So my comment to that was, there's no small brush fire under these circumstances. Some added context to that day, at that particular moment, we had 22 mile an hour sustained winds, 35 to 40 mile an hour gusts. That's what these guys were contending with at the initial house fire. So I immediately added myself to the call. I got in just a couple moments after Company 34 got there. They were leading off, but they had to lead off the rear of the wagon and go around the downed wire going up this makeshift driveway. So I helped them from the engine company to help advance some of that line just to keep it away from the attack line. I'm sorry, from the electrical line. It was about that time that Chief Stroop got there, because again, he was cued in very quickly, got there. This thing was starting to really take off. His folks were making a stop on it, but it wasn't keeping up. So I told Chief Stroop that I would go up 109 east, up the hill, to see if I could find out where the fire line actually was. I made it about 1,000 feet up the road, and it was moving at a pretty good pace. So another bit of added context for the audience, and I think we've talked about it, but I don't think unless you've seen this topography, you can appreciate it. From his command post and from Company 34's perspective, they're literally looking up a hill. The wind is at their back, and the fire is running up the hill. I think Captain Green calculated it somewhere on the 20-degree slope, I think is what we figured out. We knew we had potential involvement with structures, but you couldn't see it through the smoke, and because of the hill, the crest of the hill, you couldn't see anything beyond it. Same issue that he was contending with from the opposite side on Conoy. When you take a look at what Captain Green was describing as his approach, what you can't tell from this aerial view is the driveway he went up, you could ski off of if you wanted to. It is a very, very steep slope. So the same types of obstacles to vision that 34 and Chief Stroop were encountering on their side of the hill, Company 14 was dealing with the same type of situation from their end. They're eating smoke because they're in the face of the wind, and Company 34 in command had the wind to their back. So it was very, very interesting. I went about 1,000 feet up the road, realized this thing was really, really starting to take off. I asked Stroop if he could have Company 9's tanker, which was coming in from the east, to hold up at the top of the hill in approximate proximity to where I was, with the thinking that ultimately that was going to be the second front, if you will, on this assault. And then for some additional added context in case it was missed, this really ended up being a three-faced frontal assault. You had Company 34 that was handling really the west side of things. Mm-hmm. You had Company 9 and Company 35, ladder and engine, handling the eastern frontal assault, and then you had Captain Green on the Conoy side. So, yeah.
So, in case I forget to mention it later, right? If there's one lesson we haven't walked away from already, you get some senior people here at this table that recognized red flag warning, dry day, windy day. There's no such thing as a small brush fire, right? We get dispatched these small brush fires on these type of days. You need to be having the conversation in the mornings because it doesn't matter where you work, right? Downtown Silver Spring, inside the Beltway, Sligo Creek Parkway, up 29, Paint Branch. You can have islands on fire out on the river. It doesn't matter where you are, right? You got to take these red flag warnings in these days pretty seriously. So you get into the command post with Chief Stroop. What conversation did you guys have about water supply, additional resources? Did you call for additional command officers, and if so, why?
Yeah, so we had a brief, very, very brief face-to-face. This was just evolving so quickly. What he really needed was, at that particular moment, in addition to additional resources, he needed a forward observer. He needed to get a general sense of where the fire was going, and where would be potentially a good place to make a stand as it related to where the fire growth was. Company 34, again, was already engaged in trying to make the stop. So I acted for him as that forward observer. Went about 1,000 feet up the road, immediately cut a right.
In your vehicle?
No.
No. Okay.
I-
So I was going to be one of my questions, right? On forward observer on something like this, is it by foot or by vehicle, right? So I'm sorry.
Well, my vision was that I was going to walk about 400 feet up the road, bang a right into the hill slope, and I would find the fire was there. The more that I kept going up the road, the more I realized this thing was really spreading. So probably on the order of about 1,000 feet of somewhat running, I cut a right up on the hill and found that that was in fact the current stopping point. And that's when I radioed back to Chief Stroop. It was my recommendation that we have a tanker stop in that general vicinity, so that when the next in company came, they could nurse off that tanker to make that second frontal assault, if you will. It was an all-hands working call. The only thing I can tell you, we talked about this a little bit earlier, there wasn't a single body on this call that was not physically engaged in doing something because we had to physically engage.
Chief Stroop, so with all the intel you're getting, command post, was there ever a point in time where you felt you had a handle on where this fire was, looking at a map, where it was contained to?
No, because it was not contained.
Okay.
I mean, it probably wasn't contained for, I don't know.
When I say
2.5 hours.
when I say contained, I don't mean by putting out the fire. I mean looking at a map and
Oh,
drawing a line.
so-
It's within this border.
Yeah, so the duty chief was excellent in being able to show me how far east it had extended, and I utilized the safety officer to go around to Conoy Road because there were reports of there was a report of another house that was being threatened. So I had Safety 700 go around to Conoy Road, and they made it to the next house that's, I guess if you look at the map now, it's the house that's just under the east sign or the east designation up there. And apparently there was a neighbor there that was concerned.
These look like big houses, by the way.
They're good-sized houses.
Yeah.
6,000 square feet easy.
Okay.
Yeah. So I used basically the safety officer. He was another forward observer from that other side to kind of let me know, just what's going on that other side. And again, I was, I keep wrestling, in my head. Was this a good call or a bad call in terms of, do I call for all these front load the incident early with all these units that I don't know where to put them, or is it better to call them as I needed them? And I don't know. I don't know that I would do it any different today, only because, again, the road's blocked on Route 109. I'm thinking I need units to come from, basically Route 109 or from Company 9, but I also needed to think about, okay, in order to get units to Conoy Road, the road was blocked. They needed to figure out another way to come, to come up like Barnesville Road, to come in that way. So again, as I'm looking at, my notes, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 different times I called and I said, I need something. I need another resource. So, that was a factor throughout this incident. It's just, building this very slowly. But, it wasn't until I didn't feel comfortable until really we started, building this out in divisions and groups.
How was that built out?
Well, thinking, I'm looking at this fire and I'm thinking about where the people are, and I'm like, well, how am I going to identify, hey, this is who you are, and then to understand where they are. So it was pretty easy from the Company 14 side. We had a bunch of units go on to Captain Green's crew. So that was designated as the Conroy Road Division. I knew that we needed assets to the duty chief, and he was like, hey, send them here, and meaning, hey, I'm going to walk up the hill, and when I stop, and where I kind of park, well, I don't know, he didn't move his car, but he stood, and we waited until Tanker 9 arrived, and when Tanker 709 arrived, we kind of designated that as the East Division. So we had a couple units on that side. So then it was just easy. I was like, well, what am I going to call Captain Livingston's crew right in front of me? So if I have an East, I have a West. So basically, I had 3 different divisions right away. I had an East, a West, and a Conway Road. And that's kind of how we designated things. So that was easier to work with geographically.
Did you designate anybody's water supply?
So it wasn't until we got the road open and I actually utilized engine 709. They were the water supply unit. Let me back up a little bit. So we're supplying and we're getting ready to run out of water. I have tanker 714 on the scene. I know the area, but I don't know where any of the water supply sources are. And these guys are engaged. And I'm thinking, all right, how am I going to identify this? Mm-hmm. So I told Captain Green earlier, it was the tanker driver came over to me and was like, hey, I have a recommendation. We utilize the Barnesville School, 18801 Barnesville Road. Oh, sorry, it was Monocacy Elementary School. 18801 Barnesville Road as the fill site. It's about, so far away. And I was like, okay, great. So that was he made it much easier for me. Once I figured that out, I was able to open up the road and I was able to send a fill engine there. That made things really easy.
Okay. Lieutenant, you got anything? Oh, I'm sorry. Chief Davis has something from the
Any
YouTube.
thoughts on getting a drone up?
Not in that wind.
No.
Yeah,
That's probably an interesting thing because the cops have one. Right? Germantown has a drone now, I think.
We'd have to call for them. No, I didn't.
No, gotcha.
Wasn't a thought.
that might have been useful as the containment of the fire occurred and as we were getting in towards the evening hours if we were looking for hot spots. But the foliage in that particular area was pretty considerable, so I'm not 100% confident that a drone would have been able to provide us the aerial perspective that we were looking for. And it was untenable winds. Unless they had a jet engine on that drone, it wasn't going to be able to sustain the height and the
Cops,
perspective.
they could.
And the
They
pictures
might.
do it no justice
They
now.
might.
Those pictures do it absolutely no justice.
So the other thing for context for the audience, and really paints a picture for what these folks were up against. At one point, we had fire in the trees 30 feet off the ground. So it wasn't just brush. Captain Livingston pointed this out earlier. This picture actually somewhat of a misrepresentation because it looks like it's very green. But it wasn't just ground foliage. It was stumps. We had all kinds of trees that were in various levels of decay, but it was not atypical on this particular fire for us to be finding fire 20, 30 feet in the air in the trees. And that in itself provides inherent potential safety issues relative to falling trees and what have you.
And falling. They were coming down on us.
Again, context is everything. So at the end of the day, tanker water alone, we put 48,000 gallons of water on this. That's tanker water alone. Does not include the water on the backs of the wagons. It doesn't include the drafting the Company 14 was doing on the Canoe Road side, and it doesn't include the brush trucks. That's a lot of water for what ultimately ended up being just shy of 20 acres on a 20-degree slope. That is one segue that I do want to point out that from a command control perspective, Chief Stroop definitely hit the checkbox on this, but we can't undervalue it. These folks were working hard. There were no breaks. Nobody had an opportunity to conduct any breaks. And if you're on air, you're doing hot swaps. In this particular instance, you got to start thinking about rehabilitation for your folks. It was about the time that I think we had maxed out on these folks' physical capabilities that we were up against really a need to start rotating folks out. But Chief Stroop took care of the rehabilitation piece, got the canteen there. There were then provisions for getting folks through what really was at least a quick rehab before they re-engaged, hit hot spots and what have you.
All right, so Captain Livingston, while they're doing chief things and figuring out water supply and all, let's talk about lines and placement and length and all that. So were you in a Pierce or Crimson?
No.
You're in a
no,
Crimson
our Pierce
Reserve?
has been out for 4 months.
Okay, so you're in a reserve.
We're in a reserve engine.
Different lines.
We come off the back, sort of different lines. We have, we did add our own 1.5 inch on the rear. We came off with the 2-inch because I knew we were going to be extending it. Came off with the 2-inch, 300-foot 2-inch, extended that with both racks, and then we pulled our 1.5 inch, our 300-foot 1.5 inch, and went off the end of that. I believe we lost 5 sections of hose due to the fire, burned through. The one good thing I will say is everywhere we left our bail in place for that reason. So you could swap something out at any point. You know, if you just had one with a little fountain in it, we didn't care until it finally ruptured, and then it was a matter of we wouldn't have to shut it down. We go hit the bail one back and swap it out. 29's crew, I got 2 off of 29's engine that brought us hose, and we needed more hose. So 800 feet away is where I met Mike Green.
So did you extend a line 800 feet is what you
800
ended up doing? And was that off of the 2-inch line, or
Off
was
the
there any
2.
sort of
Correct.
larger lines built out?
So everything we did ended up, we needed to make sure that we had the 1.5 inch nozzles on
Yep.
the end just for our pressure. We never had a pressure issue one time.
Okay.
We ran out of water multiple times, but we're waiting for tankers to come through there also. So I believe he said he had a number that we flowed. Our engine alone flowed just south of 24,000 gallons.
All right, Captain Green, same thing for you. For initial lines, what can you just talk us through your thought process or what you ended up using? And then
Yeah, so we initially pulled a 200-foot 1.5 crawl sleigh, and that was doing, pretty good, taking care of the fire that was encroaching on the house. The one that I had pulled personally was another 200-foot 1.5 crawl sleigh that went to the backyard. All of those lines ended up being extended by forestry hose that we do carry. I mean, in fact, we had just put those on there probably 2 shifts prior to that because we had another small brush fire that we really needed it on, so we added that in. But just to kind of put it together with what Brett was saying, when I met Brett, we had eventually pulled a 300-foot line off the rear and added forestry line to it, so it was in the 400-foot range. So Brett was at 800, we were at 400. We met, somewhere in the middle of that woods, and I don't think that the map and the picture do it justice. I was thinking about it on the way down here this morning. That was a 1,200-foot distance, from where Brett's engine was to where mine was. The fire was there when we got there within 2 to 3 minutes. So that fire traveled over a quarter of a mile in a matter of under 5 minutes.
Wow. Were we able? Do we get any brush engines or brush trucks in the vicinity in the woods?
There was the only way you were getting anything in that woods was led by multiple chainsaws. Like there was nothing getting in there. Plus you had the hill, you weren't going to breach the hill. It was get a running start up the hill to get in there.
Initially, there's a small entrance that leads about, 200 feet in from the right side of that picture. If you get back to the overview, the creek basically runs basically up that. The bottom parallel white line says 500 feet. There's a road that leads right up in there. The issue, we could not put anybody up that road initially because that's where the line fell for the power line. So that was marked off with safety tape right away that no one could cross into that area.
So the line is actually going through the woods. The power line is going through the woods.
Yeah. So. We really couldn't get a brush engine or any brush trucks to this fire at all. This was all, you bring hand tools and bring a hand line and fight your way through these woods to put it out.
And we had somebody go right towards the wire while we were in there. You know, there was somebody yelling at them on the radio, telling them
I had
you know,
to
stop.
I had to yell to somebody to stop. Yep.
It was, it was very easy to see, and it was just a matter of people scattering at one point.
What about tools? Did you come off and end up using any tools? I mean, it's pretty limited on the engine companies.
We know. We were straight up hose, and it was, like I said, we were only two of us back there.
Okay, no
So,
saws or anything.
Me and my fourth were back there, no saws,
Captain
no
Green.
rakes.
We used saws late into the incident, not initially. Yeah, initially it was all hose lines. Really wasn't a lot of need for brush rakes and that sort of stuff. It was just a water issue. Again, we did eventually have the gentleman come in with the skid loader and the front end loader, and he did a lot of work for us. He was able to push down some of the trees that were burning in the top
Yeah, I'm sure.
while we cut down some of the others. But yeah, chainsaws came into it probably an hour or more into it.
There were a lot of trees that magically fell after the fire that might have been burning up high. You know, we couldn't even reach them with our lines, so they just happened to fall down safely.
And I'll add one other thing, and everybody knows I'm not a big engine guy, you know, historically, but if you've never been on an incident like this, hose line management is an absolute nightmare. Because when you pull your line to a certain point, and now there's fire 50 feet over here to your left, you've got to go back around 6 or 8 or 10 trees and reweave that line back down through there. So it's a nightmare, you know, just trying to manage a simple hose line.
Was foam used at all? Was it after the
Not by us.
fact?
No, it wasn't. I don't think it was used. It wasn't used at all.
Okay.
It wasn't used at all.
And was DNR ever brought, forestry or anything? Were they ever brought into the event?
They were not. They were not.
Okay.
Nope. It was all us.
So 48,000 plus gallons of water used, right?
Tanker water only.
Just from the system.
Yeah, from the cistern, and the cistern held 60, there's a picture of it, right?
Actually, the cistern, the fill site engine said they filled 16 tankers.
16 tankers.
16
So,
units.
yeah.
Not all 3,500 gallon.
So on the screen is a picture of that cistern, right? And this one, I'm not sure, and Chief Davis can insert himself, but I'm not sure they all have signs with the gallonage throughout the county. They do not. So it's something that, command officers get detailed and moved around a lot. So relying on the company officers and those firefighters that are assigned to those areas with these cisterns is pretty important. And I know there's a document that lives somewhere on the MDC or the iPad that lists all these locations. But it's important, and I think this call was one of them that shows the importance of firefighters stepping up and saying, hey, cistern right down the street, we can use it, was certainly beneficial, right, to the command
Absolutely.
officer in this case.
Chief, we didn't have an opportunity to do it on this particular call because we got lucky with the bilateral traffic on 109 and the fact that we had, as we know now, 60,000 plus cistern. If this had gotten to 50 plus acres, we would have had to been looking for secondary water. And that's probably a takeaway in terms of, our chief officers is that once you start getting into a situation where you think you're going to outrun the available water, you really ought to think about a water supply officer. Get somebody to take that piece off your plate and let them deal with whatever shuttles and traffic. We never got there, and we got really lucky because the bilateral traffic on 109 was such that once we got that flow going, for the most part, we were in safe territory.
So initially, we gave Captain Green and Company 14 a tanker to their side of the incident, and but I couldn't really facilitate some sort of shuttle. But he told me that they had a pond over there, so he got another engine company, and we're able to draft from there, which enabled us to have that secondary water source from his side, and which actually gave me back the tanker that I could utilize, filling up other engines on the old 100 road side. So he was pretty self-sufficient from that perspective once he got that up and running.
And that was probably an hour or more into the incident because when I got the tanker, that's all I had. So I was operating off the tanker water. And then when the engine, which came from Frederick County, arrived, it took them a while to get the draft set up. And I told the officer, I said, look, get the draft set up, then I want you to keep this tanker full in case you lose a draft or anything happens. So we operated that way for about an hour. And then I think it was after the 2nd Battalion Chief, I believe Battalion 3 came in, he had contacted us and said, hey, do you still need that tanker? And I said, no, I think we're comfortable at this point that our draft is good, our water source is good, you can have it, but we're going to have to break some things down. So we had to totally break the draft down, move the apparatus around to get them the tanker to use.
Cap, how many feet was that from, I never measured it. What was
Our lay from the driveway,
from the pond at the bottom of the hill?
it was either 600 or 700 feet we had out. And it was straight up the hill, like you
I
said.
know, yeah, it was
Straight up the
definitely a
hill.
lift.
And it took them at least 3 sections to set up the draft of hard sleeve.
We met with the homeowner afterwards, a couple days after the fact, and I forgot how much water is in that pond. He was very, very, very educated to the topography and the water sources in that immediate area because they've done testing amongst the residents. I forgot how many gallons of water was in that pond.
He
but
said it was at least 1 million.
It's a ridiculous amount of water. So in our minds, we automatically earmarked in our mind that, God forbid, we have something, whether it be a structure or brush in the future, we have 1 million gallons of water sitting in that pond.
Was that pond designated as a fill site on our
It's
map?
actually not. There's another pond on the other side of Canoy Road that's a little bit further back that is designated, and we learned from talking to that gentleman, yeah, you can kind of see it there.
Right there.
Right below where it says Canoy Road, there's looks to be a very large pond. and-
Really good point, Mike.
Yeah, we all learned from talking to the homeowner, who I think was a prior member of Cabin John, so he understood the lingo and everything, and he said, you shouldn't be drafting from that pond, it's only 6 to 12 inches deep. It looks very big, but he said a lot of time in the summertime, it goes down to almost nothing. He said, if you need water, come to our place, and in fact, we also we put him in touch with Chief Davis, because they're going to put a dry hydrant in at the pond at his driveway, and then further on down Canoy Road there is another really good source where a stream comes under the road, and the neighbor there is looking to put a dry hydrant in as well. So
Interesting, okay. You had mentioned Battalion 3, right? So this is one thing I didn't touch on. But you were fortunate, and this is for Chief Stroop, you were fortunate to have Chief Dimitriadis there pretty much the same time you got there. At some point, you had called for an additional chief officer, right? So you had Duty Chief, Battalion 703, as well as Safety 700 acting as another forward observer.
Yep.
So I guess that's a lesson. You can expand on it if you want, how beneficial that was, but it's a lesson for command officers on a call like this, not to be afraid to call for additional help, because you're going to be overwhelmed pretty quickly, especially if this expands to the point where, hey, my cistern's now out of water, and now you got a whole nother problem you got to deal with in finding more water.
Yeah,
Right?
so I think the initial issue that I had was, I have units that are out. They're telling me that, we have an active fire that's moving rapidly to this area, and I need this. And I hear another company says, I need this. So we've all had that before. And then, so I'm kind of keeping, doing the mental math. I can kind of keep things straight, but then I'm trying to write things down in a chart to kind of keep me straight. And then add the water supply piece. Okay, where's the water? Where's the water supply? How is the water supply going to work? So that was like the extra component that it was very difficult to kind of to work out without a little bit of just relief. And the relief actually came in from the part where the 2nd Battalion Chief actually arrived, and I was like, hey, take this chart and write on it. I can deal with this incident, but I'm trying to put everything to pen and paper, and I can't do that and do this at the same time. So he was able to do that, and it worked out really well.
Anything else?
Just to touch on, so were both captains, were you each the division leader when you guys were assigned to the division? And
I was eventually relieved by a command officer.
what challenges were faced with that? Any challenges or anything in specific that?
No, because I only had, I guess, 4 units in my division. It was our engine, the tanker from 31, the engine from 23 in Frederick, and then we had truck 34 assigned to us. So we were all pretty much face to face. We're all working in the same general area. The crew from Frederick did a great job. Once they got the draft established, they come up and helped us with the shed that had caught on fire along with truck 34. So yeah, we were all kind of face to face. So I don't think I had any, real challenges with that. I was eventually relieved. I think it was Chief 8 that had showed up from Gaithersburg and took over our division. And then we eventually had two brush trucks. Right around the same time, we had two brush trucks come in from our side, and we're helping out.
Okay. Captain Livingston.
Hose line management,
Okay.
moving it once we had to move, stick and move.
Do you have more people assigned to moving hose versus pulling lines?
At any given time, I had my two and two from 29's engine,
Okay.
and that's it.
And how many
Everybody
lines?
was spread out. There were other lines in the woods at that point. There were,
All over the place.
I believe, Tower 8 showed up with their chainsaws and
Went to
a
work.
lot going on.
Okay.
So I'll start closing this out, and what we'll do is we'll go around the table here, and I'll just ask you, starting with Captain Green. You got back to the station, I'm sure you discussed it, right? Like, what would you have done, as with any call, what would you have done differently? What were your main challenges?
When we got back to the station, we immediately were dispatched on another brush fire, which ended up being, well, not that large. We handled it by ourselves, but it was probably 2,000 to 3,000 square feet or more. But anyway, we did discuss it, and again, I think in this case, I was fortunate that I did make the right decision to go down Kenoi Road. We ended up in the right place, and were able to, probably save that gentleman's house. And it was a good place to operate from. So, in the end, that was a good decision. I didn't know it at the time.
So using your phone was,
Yeah. So just, again, looking at Google Maps, getting the topographical, not topographical, but just the satellite view so I could see where the forested area was. And, that worked out really well. Again, if I didn't have my phone, which I don't always have my phone with me, the Sonom phone is there. We could have got the same result with that. And I guess I could have used the MDC to pull up Google Maps. I just think it typically takes a long time to do that, depending on how the internet service is on those. So there were, multiple ways I could have done the same thing. But it just happened to work out that I brought my phone with me, and in 2 clicks I had a satellite view of where we were. So,
okay.
So I don't want to sit here and say I made all the right decisions. I made one right decision to get us to the right place. And I think that was really the biggest decision on my part that impacted.
Had a big impact.
That
Yep.
impacted the
Yep.
incident. The rest of it was just tactical stuff, and it wasn't a lot to it. It was just pull a line to the fire and put it out.
Okay. Captain Livingston?
I probably should have established command a little at some point or another. I just had the whole thought process of going to work over everything else, trying to catch it, and would love to have had my fourth, but didn't have that luxury.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I'm good with what I did and what we did and how it went actually.
Okay. Chief Stroop?
Yeah, I think this is one of those incidents that you think you're arriving to one thing, and then all of a sudden you're constantly playing catch up. And again, it was adding this unit, adding that unit. Should I have front loaded it? Those are the things that you just wrestle with. I think that the dynamic of trying to help or coordinate resources to where it needed to go and build a water supply plant were probably the most difficult things that I dealt with immediately. But then once that was rectified, everything just kind of worked out really well. These guys did an amazing job.
Yeah, sounds like it.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah,
That I'll
please.
pose to you guys as chief officers, because this happened, I think, at least 3 times where they called the chief and asked for resources, and he had to say, "I'm sorry, I'm tapped out. I don't have them right now." And I'm just kind of wondering, how do you deal with that? How do you,
Yeah,
that's
so-
can't be a good feeling to have to
So
tell
it's,
somebody.
it
that.
was one of those, hey, I need a, as I heard from him, like probably 3 or 4 different times, I need another section of hose. And, my point was, you need to send a runner. I don't have it, So that's, it's kind of like, hey, We need an attic ladder.
Yeah, yeah.
Go tell the driver.
Yep. Yeah, but, I mean, I'll let you answer as well, but it's a lot of prioritizing as well, right? We gotta, what we have on the scene and where are the priorities? You know, start taking into these structures that are, you know, as soon as you start talking about threatened structures, that changes the ballgame for us. As far as, okay, where do we need to put all these units or relocate these units?
Yeah.
Which is hard to do on a brush fire, right? It's not like you're going from one floor to the next in a house fire.
Right.
You're going around to a different part in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot in terms of the chief officer community. We're very fortunate as an organization to be where we are in terms of our training, our education, how we employ tactics and make problems go away. We're always looking for improvement. That's part of what this program's about. In this particular instance, to your point, Cap, we're relying on you when we don't have the additional resources to give to you to do those things that set your company apart from other companies that can't think out of a box or can't think quickly enough to acclimate to the circumstances. And as long as you're engaging in strategies and tactics that are consistent with what he's established as the priorities, that's what sets you guys apart. And on this particular call, we were out-resourced right from the beginning. We were overrun by weather conditions that were making this fire go places that we just couldn't forecast. And because of the folks' actions collectively on this call, there's no question in my mind that we saved acreage and we saved houses. And if you talk to the homeowner whose house was immediately threatened, he acknowledged that. So that's testament to their work. To your question about, you know, what I've done differently, I look back in retrospect at the safety aspects of this. I don't think that there were any of our folks that were in imminent danger of being overrun by wildfire. But when I look back in retrospect at some of the dangers that they were facing in terms of potential falling trees and things of that sort, this would have been a good event where one of us could have cued Chief Stroop to perhaps get a second or third safety officer in play. Because Captain Weimer, much like myself, in those initial minutes, we were engaged in physical play. There just was no time to not engage in the fight. He had it initially. We amped up his level of command and control strengths at the command post with Battalion 3. But everybody else was engaged in a physical fight in the first half hour, 35 minutes. So looking back in retrospect, I should have cued command to probably look at the safety piece a little bit closer. And the other thing that we can't undervalue is when we're pulling our residents in to help us, you got to really keep an eye on them. It was his lieutenant at the time that actually raised the concerns about levels of PPE, and all of us were not necessarily in the appropriate levels of PPE. It was he that also expressed the concern that, you know, having this guy run around with a front end loader and a skid loader, and he made a difference. There's no question he made a difference. But you told him to take down a tree, he was going to take down 4. And when you have folks that are operating in that vicinity, you're always at risk of a potential tree falling on one of our own. So the safety piece of this, we really can't discount, particularly in the environment that these guys were in.
So taking yourself back up to the 30,000-foot level as duty chief, right? You want to touch on not just this event, but touch on the importance for field personnel to get checked off as brush truck and brush engine drivers?
Yeah, I think as an organization, I think from my observations, not just on the A shift, but across the B and the C, I think we do a pretty good job of emphasizing the importance of cross-training, particularly with our tankers and our brush trucks. I know that our battalions do talk about that quite a bit. I don't think we can underestimate the value that comes when you're dealing with an event like this that occurs in somebody else's first due. You have multiple companies that are responding that are out of position or out of their normal response areas, and having the versatility of having adjacent companies go by and pick up additional equipment. And that's what we typically do with our MABs, our air units, but it could also apply to tankers and brush trucks.
Yeah, good stuff. So before I turn it over to Chief Davis, I just want to thank you all for coming today. Thank everybody out there for watching. There's been a lot of discussions at this table regarding different events, house fires, hazmats, batteries, all that kind of stuff. I think this is probably the first one we've had about a brush fire. I think we can all agree that they're not going away. So hopefully everybody took something away from this discussion today. So without further ado, Chief Davis.
I'd like to say, first of all, folks, thank you very much for being willing to tell your stories, and hopefully folks who were not there that day have a better understanding of actions that were taken, decisions that were made, and so forth. And I forgot all about it. That night we did have a fire in Northwest Branch. Winds had died down by then, but again, even in our urban areas, as urban as we have in Montgomery, you can still have some difficult places, and probably everybody's first due has some place that you could have a pretty difficult woods fire impinging upon structures like I can't get to that easily, right? So thinking about UTVs, thinking about brush trucks, thinking about how am I going to get people here, thinking about how am I going to refill a cistern after it's done, right? Who's responsible for that? What do we do with that? All those kind of things come into play on these rather unusual events. So to close out today, again, if you're looking for those COPDI credit, make sure you fill that form out on the PSTA webpage. We don't have any specific date yet for June. We have a number of things in the hopper. There's been a couple larger fires out there, structure fires, that we're trying to see if we have enough info on that to do either a boss talk or from the command post. Hopefully get some metro stuff up, a few items on that. And then we have a couple other ideas out there as well. So no date right now. We'll keep you posted and look for an announcement from the training academy about upcoming events in the month of June and July. So that's it. Again, as always, thanks for watching. And until next time, take care of yourselves.